Well, first of all, what I'm going to read to you today to start out is, it's titled, "This Will Touch Your Heart." So this is a little different than what I've been reading previously. Starts out, "Time is like a river. You can't touch the water twice because the flow that has passed will never pass again. Enjoy every moment of life." As a bagpiper, I play many gigs. Recently, I was asked by a funeral director to play at a graveside service for a homeless man. He had no family or friends, so the service was to be at a pauper cemetery on the Nova Scotia backcountry. As I was not familiar with the backwoods, I got lost, and being a typical man, I never stopped to ask directions. I finally arrived an hour late and saw the funeral, that the funeral guy had evidently gone and the hearse was nowhere in sight. There were only the diggers and the crew left, and they were eating lunch. I felt really bad and apologized to the man for being so late. So I went to the side of the grave and I looked down at the vault lid was already in place. I didn't know what else to do, so I started to play my bagpipes. The workers put down their lunches and began to gather around. I played out my heart and soul for this man with no family, no friends. I played like I've never played before for this homeless guy. As I played Amazing Grace, the workers began to weep. They wept, I wept, we all wept together. When I finished, I packed up my bagpipes and started for my car. Though my head hung low and my heart was full. As I opened the door to my car, I heard one of the workers say, "I've never seen nothing like that before, and I've been putting in septic tanks for 20 years." It ends by saying, "Apparently I'm still lost." Would you bow with me, please? Our gracious God, we come before you on this last day of RoundUp, and we thank you for the blessings that you've given us. Those blessings are so many. Those blessings include having your word open to us, to understanding the heritage of our tradition. But more importantly, it's the lives that have been poured into each other, the thoughts that have been shared, the loves that have been shared, the losses that have been shared, the sadness and the joy, and the chance that we have to get together in this place at this time with people of like mind who all love you and all want to serve you. Help us this morning, especially as we engage the story of Jesus, that you would guide our thoughts and our hearts, and that we leave this place with a desire to know you better. We ask this in the name of your Son, Jesus, who died because he loved us. Amen. I realized after I got done yesterday that I did forget one thing, and this kind of goes to what Terry was saying, but I did finish the story of Ahithophel. Do you know who that is? Ahithophel? Here? Ahithophel? Oh, good. Ahithophel doesn't know. But Ahithophel, when he was given advice to Absalom, and it was confounded by Hushai, Ahithophel went and committed suicide. Now that's the end of that story, because first of all, he realized that he'd gone against God, and secondly, he knew that his days were numbered in the kingdom. So I forgot to mention that, so just back up and put that in your tape. I also want to start out, because I started introducing yesterday what I wanted to talk about today. There really are 6 main characters that I want to talk about today. We're just going to touch on that. And there's also a group of shepherds. And I guess how I want to introduce this is to talk about the fact that when I was 30 years old, I was teaching the Gospel of John at Lubbock Christian University. And I thought as I got ready for that class, I'm the same age that Jesus was when he did his ministry. I want to read the Gospel this time, not just as a student of the Word, but as a 30-year-old man who probably had some of the same kind of emotions, maybe similar life experiences, certainly stage in life that Jesus did when he started. And it really changed my perspective because as I started reading then and later as I teach Life of Christ, in fact, I taught several classes at Love a Christian, and they kept assigning me classes. You know, one of my favorites was Romans, but I said, you know, the class I want to teach is Life of Christ to freshmen, because they need to understand that Life of Christ. And the stuff I was teaching wasn't stuff that I ever heard in college. And the reason is because I'd go back and I'd look at the text and say, now, why would that happen? Why would Jesus say that? Or why would, and just open my mind to exploring the scriptures rather than just reading, because there's so many things that I've skipped over before. I'm going to toss you a couple of hand grenades right now as we start. And some of you know the answers to this. A lot of things that I've come up with are assumptions I make, things that I have kind of figured out in my mind, and they may or may not be right, but they make sense. Okay? First one is, where did Luke get his information that he records in Luke chapter 1 and 2?
Witnesses.
Witnesses? Somebody said something else?
Then he talked to people.
He talked to people?
Physicians.
Specifically who?
Mary.
Yeah. Where do you think we got the Magnificat, as it's called? My soul magnifies the Lord. You know, I've heard people say, well, you may have got that from James, Jesus' brother, who's still around. But I kind of doubt it, because as we go through this, we don't have time to talk about this now. I think there's very little communication between Mary and the family, between Elizabeth and her family, about what actually is going on here. I mean, how do you grow up and say, hey, don't tease your brother, he's God. You know, or Jesus, you don't have to do the dishes because you're God. I think pretty quickly you'll see at times, and they show up in Luke's gospel and also in Matthew, there are times when God intercedes in Mary's life, I think, to help her remember. Because after a while, you kind of lose contact with the fact of what's going on, and Jesus becomes your kid. Day in, day out, you're doing the same things you are the other kids, and you don't really realize. I mean, you kind of lose that sense until you lose him at age 12. You know, and then it kind of becomes, we just misplaced God. You know, it becomes a real issue then. But I think it's very likely, you know, at the foot of the cross, Jesus says to John, I want you to take Mary. He doesn't say it just like that. You guys know the story, so I don't have to go through it. But it's very possible that John took Mary to Ephesus. In fact, there is a place in Ephesus called the House of Mary, which history, and there's some debate, but history tells us maybe the place where Mary actually resided in Ephesus. Well, who else goes to Ephesus a lot? Paul does. Who does he take with him? Luke's with him on some of those excursions. And can you imagine what it'd be like if Luke, who wants to get into the background and the history, said, I think I'll go by and talk to Mary about what it was like. And I'm so glad that we have this information, but wouldn't you like to have been a fly on the wall and listen to all those conversations that hopefully took place, that I think probably took place? Because the stuff that Luke mentions is so personal. You know, I can just see Mary saying, you know, when I was told about this, when I got together with Elizabeth, I was so excited and I was so filled with God and filled with the Spirit that I wrote down, or had written down, some thoughts I had. My soul magnifies. My soul's magnified. The glory of God is, you know, I'm the mother of the Son of God. And there's no way to express that, I think, other than the way Mary did. So that's one thing. Another thing, and I find this one kind of interesting, that in Luke chapter 2, verse 8, we read about the shepherds. What are the shepherds told?
Savior's been born.
Savior's been born. And then the angels tell him, and we can tell you where he is and you can go see him, right?
Yep.
No. Read it. What does it say?
Star.
Here's a sign for you. I can tell you this is truth, and here's the sign that proves it. If you go to Bethlehem, you're going to find a baby in a manger. Did they think that was the Messiah? Somewhere the king has been born, but they aren't told it's this big. And so all our nativity scenes, are a little bit messed up in this point. And here's the thing. I want you to understand, as we get into Zachariah, Elizabeth, Joseph, Mary, all these folks and the way they interacted. God is, boy, he's so amazingly wise at this. All the attention is diverted completely away from Jesus. I mean, if the shepherds had been told this is the Messiah, you think Jesus would have been left alone the rest of his life? No, this is the sign that the Messiah has been born. And John the Baptist is the one who gets all the attention all of his life until Jesus comes along. Now, the other thing that I think is interesting, what about the wise guys in Matthew chapter 2? Where'd they come from? The East. That's a big, they could have come from across the river somewhere. Most likely, there's one society during this time, and I think this is phenomenal. These are all assumptions I'm making, okay? I'm basically making this up. There's one society during this time where the wise men actually have authority in the kingdom and actually not only advise the king, but select the king. It's the nation of Persia. Now, how in the world did this come about? The only kingdom in the world where the wise men of the kingdom, where these guys probably came from, I mean, they are princes. They aren't just, they aren't just pilgrims coming to see this. They are actually people in charge of the kingdom. Where do you suppose they get this information? Now, no one in Israel, no one in Canaan knows that there's a star that signifies the birth of the king. But these wise men from Persia, where do they get that information?
They had the scriptures. Some Old Testament prophecy.
No, it's not in Scripture.
Your prophet.
Daniel chapter 6. You read about the government is set up because Daniel is so wise that they divide the kingdom among leaders who are wise men, and they're going to make Daniel, the head wise man, and they're going to get rid of the divisions and just make him basically next to the king. Now, if you read Daniel 6, do you know what that results in? Gets thrown in the lion's den because the other guys, it's political. You ever seen any political infighting like this anywhere? So they throw Daniel in the lion's den because of this issue. Well, he comes out and they punish the other guys, but from that point onward. Now, we have Daniel's writing in Daniel. Do you suppose, as he gives these visions to the king about the stone coming down and breaking the feet of the statue, and that kingdom was going to go throughout the world, and he's talking, of course, about the church. Do you suppose Daniel had any other things that he maybe wrote down for the wise men? When this last kingdom comes, here's a way you're going to know that the time has come. And I bet somewhere in the Persian writings of Daniel, there's something about when you see this star, you're going to know. Now, that's all assumption. I'm making all this up. But when I try to figure out who are these guys, why did they come, where did they come from, and it's probably not like not like we think of that there's a star over the manger, with one beam of light shining down, because they are astronomers. They realize something phenomenal has happened, something different has happened, and according to some ancient writings they have, probably, that it signifies that the ruler of this new kingdom that's going to rule the world has come on the scene. So they get excited and come to see Herod. Where is this king of the Jews? And that starts the ball rolling. So there's so many things I think we skip over as we talk about Jesus and his life and background and all these things. There's so much history behind this too that, I love talking about Antiochus. Just throw that name out. And what he does before all this happens that changes the whole landscape of Jewish history. But God is so wise in what he does that the events we're going to look at today, he picks people who are unsung heroes. People you would walk by every day, and he makes them the heroes of the story. I've often said, and sometimes gotten in trouble for it, that when Jesus came, he didn't pick 12 Bible professors from Christian college, 12 preachers, to be his disciples. He picked people out of society. The same way God does that as he gets started here with the story of Jesus. And don't you know that when I start teaching this to kids, I say, if you're going to have, and they don't have this background that you do, but if you were going to pick somebody to raise your kids, what would you look for in their lives? And we'll put a list on the board, and they'll come up with 20 or 25 different things. That they're spiritual, they're godly, they are responsible, they're, all the things you go through. Don't you think God had a list? If I'm going to send my son down there and have him raised by someone, here's what I want in those people's lives. And I think you find in Mary and Joseph common, everyday people who are just the best people you can find. I think you find that in Zechariah. In fact, doesn't it say that about Zechariah and Elizabeth? Look at Luke chapter 1. I'm going to have to get the class stuff. Luke chapter 1, verse 5. There's a priest named Zechariah who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. His wife Elizabeth was also a descendant of Aaron. Both of them were righteous in the sight of God, observing all the Lord's commands and decrees. How?
Blamelessly.
Blamelessly. These are the best people you can find. And I think if you look at Joseph and Mary, I think God was looking for the same kind of people when he picked them. But do they light up a billboard? Do they have their own TV show? Do they have followers on Twitter? No, they're just living their life and doing the best they can. And Zechariah now, as we talked about, has been, it's been his life, his whole life. If you're a priest, he probably lives in Jericho or somewhere around Jericho, and they go down and do their duties at the temple. And Zechariah has been selected by lot. There's so many priests now that you don't have one person that gets to go in the most holy of holies, so you have a lottery for it. He got chosen to go into the most holy of holies and stand next to the altar of incense. And this is the highlight of his life, he thinks. Until he gets in there, and I've often wondered, there's some things I haven't figured out. It says he's standing on the right side of the altar. Why do we know that? Don't know. I mean, I have no idea, but I've got a question mark in my Bible. Why the right side? Why is that important? There's got to be a reason for that. But Zechariah is there, and of course the angel comes to him, and he says, you're going to have a baby. And Zechariah questions that. Now, what I think is interesting is basically his question is, we're old and well advanced in years, and we're past childbearing age. How is this going to happen? And what does the angel say? Well, God can make this happen, but because you questioned it, you're going to remain silent. Now, I've wondered about that, because if you look at what happens to Mary, she has a very similar question. How can this be, since I'm still a virgin? And the angel doesn't shut her up. In fact, she gets real chatty. And I think part of it is that God is once again, Zechariah he can't tell anybody about this, he can't explain this, but everybody knows. If he'd come out of there and said, the reason I was so long in there is because God came to me, and he gave me a message, and people would have said, oh, sure. You know, you're just trying to get a little extra mileage out of your one chance to serve the most holy of holies. But obviously something has happened to him, and everybody is aware of it. And Elizabeth goes into seclusion at that point, and you know, I don't know how much people know about her having a baby, but the word gets around. And so there's a couple of things miraculous, and everybody is excited about what's happening to Zachariah and Elizabeth. It's public knowledge, it is exciting knowledge, it is stupendous knowledge, because here's this old, you know, imagine, I don't know how old they are, you know, old here could be anywhere from 50 to 80. But imagine that, you know, I always like talking about Moses that way. When he's 80, he's told to go back to Egypt and bring the children out, and I'm thinking, how many of us at 80 are looking for a new career? I don't know how old they are here, but no matter how old they are, just think about raising a kid. And probably Zachariah and Elizabeth, they're probably not around when John does his ministry. That may be why he's with the Essenes, and he's out preaching in sackcloth and ashes, and he's honey and all those kind of things. It's probably because he's raised by this community of Essenes. But this happens to Zachariah and Elizabeth, and let's see, down in verse 16. Many people of Israel will he bring back to the Lord their God, and he will go on before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah, to turn the hearts of the parents to the children, and disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord. Now, in the verse before that, verse 15, he said, he's going to be filled with the Holy Spirit even before he's born. Now, I think that's significant because you know what happens when Mary comes up the walk. When Zechariah asked the question, how can this happen, how can this be, and then he's silent, I picture what it must have been like. Well, there's some things I won't get into that are pretty indelicate, but, you know, Elizabeth has got to be questioning, what's going on here? I don't know whether Elizabeth can read or write. I don't know whether Mary can read or write, because during this time, women usually didn't get that kind of education. A lot of guys did. So we do know that Zechariah can write, because when they name the baby, it says he writes down his name will be John, and automatically he can start talking again. So we know he can write that, but I don't know how he can for 9 months, how do they communicate with each other? I mean, do they come with hand signals? Do they, you know? But Elizabeth, we don't know how much of this she really knows about, except, here's the indelicate part. All of a sudden, Zechariah gets real interested in her. Let's just put it that way. And, you know, life changes for them in a lot of different ways. And she's excited because she says, my disgrace has been taken away. I'm going to assume that she knows this is from God. I'm going to assume there's some kind of communication going on between the two, but we don't know exactly how much. Now we get to Mary, and this is where I was kind of talking yesterday. I am so amazed by Mary. Here is a girl, as I said, probably anywhere from 12 to 15, probably 13 or 14 years old, which is the year at which you get betrothed and get married. And here is this girl who is living her life. I like talking about this in chapter 2 of John, where you read about the wedding feast in Cana of Galilee. Because when you get married, you become the king and queen of the village for up to a week. And they have big banquets, and they celebrate your marriage, and you know, you guys probably know this, but girls get real excited about weddings. You know, guys kind of show up for those events, but girls, you know, girls think about them before they've even met a guy they're going to marry. I mean, girls really on that. I mean, they think about what they're going to look like in their dress, and as they get older, they think about who their bridesmaids are going to be. And you know, Larie's mom used to make wedding cakes, and she'd spend weeks making these cakes. And you know, it's a huge event. Well, it was even a huger event back then, because this is the one time in your life, if you're a poor person in Nazareth, for example, that you really get to stand up on a pedestal and be important, and everybody kind of bows down to you. There's a lot more going on than Mary just hearing, I'm going to have a baby. Because when she hears she's going to have a baby, and that the fact that that baby is going to come from God, and she's not married, what does that do to her wedding? There is no wedding. She and Joseph kind of have to sneak around. In fact, when it says at the end of Luke chapter 2, when Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and favor with God and man, I think I vision that as being kind of like this. There's that Jesus boy. He is such a good kid. It's too bad the way he got started, because he'll never amount to anything. Now, once again, I want you to see how at this same time, when Jesus starts his ministry, as he starts, who's the talk of the town? Who's well known throughout Israel? John the Baptist. All the attention is on him. They want him to be the Messiah. He's fiery, he's a leader, he's getting the crowds to come out and see him. And then, then Jesus comes up to be baptized. And another little aside here. Did Jesus and John know each other? Doesn't sound like it. Why do you say that? Does he say, I didn't know you? Or does he say, I didn't know you were the one? See, my guess would be, do you suppose Mary and Elizabeth never talked to each other again? I bet Mary looked forward to the Passover because the family group would go to the Passover together. And as they go through the hillside and the countryside, they pick up other relatives along the way. Jerusalem grew from 150,000 people to almost 1.5 million people during the Passover, because all the Jews who were within walking distance would come to that city. And I can't imagine that Mary would not get excited about the opportunity to get with Elizabeth and compare notes. We've got these babies that are 6 months apart that are now young men, and I don't know when Elizabeth dies. I don't know how long she's around. We don't know when Joseph is not in the picture any longer. But my guess is that every chance they had, they got together. And Jesus and John, as cousins, would have been playing together. I think they did know each other growing up. That's my opinion. And I think, based on that, I think what's going on with the baptism of Jesus, he says a couple things to him. He said, you're the kind of guy I'm trying to make everybody else be. Now, he must have known him, because he said, you need to baptize me, I don't need to baptize you. And Jesus makes a statement, this must be done to fulfill all righteousness. Remember that? And then John puts him under the water. When he comes out, the heavens open, a dove comes down, and John goes, oh my goodness, it's been him the whole time. And I never knew it. I think that's what's so phenomenal about it, is Jesus is in plain sight, and nobody knows who he is. Not even the people close to him. Now, I wonder what it was like for Mary growing up with this knowledge. And I think, here there are a couple instances where I think God is doing something for Mary. Why do the shepherds show up at the manger? Well, I don't know if there's any cataclysmic, phenomenal thing except for us to do something with our nativity scenes. But Mary realizes this is a big deal. God has sent angels to guys out working the field to come and see this baby. And when the wise men come, it's a year later, at least a year later, they're in a house by that time. And the wise men come, and you imagine opening that door and there's royalty standing there. And Mary is just shocked by this. But it's a reminder of who this kid is. And I think those reminders come to help her because eventually you think, well, nothing really phenomenal. He hasn't raised people from the dead. I mean, they don't expect the Messiah to do any of the miraculous things Jesus is going to do. What do they expect him to be? Yeah, they expect him to be the next David. He's going to be the king of Israel, who's going to get rid of the Romans and make them the kingdom of the world, which he does, but no one understands how that's going to happen. So here are Mary and Elizabeth, and their everyday lives. When Jesus does the Sermon on the Mount, who's he talking to? Yes. There's a crowd. Who's in that crowd?
There are all kinds of people in it.
There are all kinds, but most of them are what they call people of the land. Now, these are the people who get up at daylight, go to work all night, and then go to sleep. They don't have savings, they don't have wealth, they don't have any property. They just live day to day. And so why does Jesus get up and say, "Blessed are you," and goes through all that list of what we call the Beatitudes? You know what he's telling me? He said, you people have been put down your whole lives, but you are exactly the people that God wants. You're the people that God loves. And they listen to him. Why? He was one of them. You know, another question I had, why does he wait till 30 to start his ministry? What?
Isn't it kind of the Old Testament thing about how they come to
Just the
the
right
age of
time.
maturity?
Well, you know, actually, I think
He's old enough to be taken seriously.
he's old enough to be taken seriously. I would think I would add a couple of things to that. This is purely assumption once again. And I think James is finally old enough to take care of the household, because Jesus cares for his mommy all of his life. He takes care of her. Even at the foot of his cross when he's dying, he's taking care of his mommy. And I think part of the 30, maybe maturity, maybe age, what does he do for a living? Okay, what does a carpenter do this time? What?
Stonemason.
Well, yeah, if you look at the pictures where Jesus is in the backyard making a stool, throw that out and don't even, because it says he is a technon, which is a builder. He is either a woodsmith or a stonemason, and he goes 3 miles every day with his dad, while his dad's alive, to, just forgot the name. There's a town being built by Herod, 3 miles north of Nazareth. No? I apologize for forgetting that. But he goes up there every day, and puts in probably a 10-hour workday, and then comes home at night. All those people know him. All those people appreciate him because he's been a worker just like they did. Now, I'm saying all this because you've got these different people who are people of no consequence, but including the ones we looked at already, who aren't the leaders, who aren't the highlighters, who aren't the people who get all the press, but all the people we looked at in the Old Testament, and now these people. Imagine how history would be different. Were they not there, or was there someone else? I mean, they have defined for us what's going to happen to Jesus. Now, I've said that, and I want to get to Anna and Simeon, because in Luke chapter 2, Jesus is presented at the temple. They give him the name Jesus, and then 33 days later, he's taken back to have purification rites. And this is basically for marriage. They present him to the Lord, and to offer sacrifice in keeping with what is said of the law, a pair of doves or 2 young pigeons. And your footnote probably refers to there, Leviticus 12. Now there was a man in Jerusalem called Simeon, who was righteous and devout. He was waiting for the consolation of Israel, and the Holy Spirit was on him. It had been revealed to him by the Holy Spirit that he would not die before he'd seen the Messiah. Moved by the same Spirit, he went into the temple courts. And when Mary and Joseph, here's another one of those incidents, they bring Jesus into the temple courts. Simeon runs up and grabs their baby. Now today, that would be something, you think somebody's trying to abduct him. But he takes this baby in his arms and he says, "Sovereign Lord, as you have promised, you may now dismiss your servant in peace. My eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared in the sight of all nations. A light for revelation to the Gentiles and the glory of your people Israel." Both Simeon and Anna, who we're going to look at next, are people who God has this, how do I say it? I mean, he loves these people. Here are two people out of all Israel. Here are two people I want to make sure they understand what's going on. And we don't know anything about Simeon other than this passage. We don't know what he did for a living. We just know that he is a devout person, that he comes to the temple whenever he can. And God says, I want to make sure Simeon sees the answer to his prayers. And I want to say something that I said the first day. If you got everything you prayed for in the last year, would the world be better off, or would just you be better off? Simeon obviously is praying for God's kingdom to be brought to light. He's praying for God's deliverance of the nations. He's praying for not only the Israel, but who else? Salvation for the Gentiles. And God says, I want to make sure Simeon gets to see this. And Simeon says, now I can die. My life is complete because I've seen this picture. Can you imagine that you're married? You may be 14, 15 years old by now. And this guy in the temple, who obviously has a relationship with God, comes up and says this about your baby. What that would do to you? Well, and then there's my favorite. This is the one I talked about some on Wednesday. Let me finish what Simeon says. Simeon blessed them and said to Mary, this child is destined to cause the falling and rising of many in Israel, and to be a sign that will be spoken against, so that the thoughts of many hearts will be revealed, and swords can pierce your soul. There was also a prophetess Anna, the daughter of Phanuel of the tribe of Asher. She was very old. She lived with her husband 7 years after marriage, and then been a widow for 84 years. I mentioned there's a problem with translation there. She may have just been 84 years, but it's possible she's older than that. She never left the temple. Let that sink in for me. She never left the temple, but worshipped night and day, fasting and praying. I asked the same question here that I asked about Jesus, who runs away and goes to the temple when they visit Jerusalem. Where did he sleep? What did he eat? What does this woman look like? Just give me some feedback on it. Here's Anna, who never leaves the temple.
He's a street person.
Yeah, when's the last time she had a shower? Her bedraggled, her clothes. She doesn't care about any of that stuff because she's there for one purpose: fasting and praying and worshiping God. I'm so taken by this image, especially when I walk by somebody in the streets of Chicago, or when I see people by the side of the road with a sign, and you never know whether they're really for real or not. And a lot of times I think about Anna, and I think about how many people walk by her every day, maybe made fun of her, maybe gave her some money. Maybe there's somebody that brings her food every day. I don't know. But God says there's two people. There's Simeon, there's Anna. Anna has got to know the Messiah is here. Of all the people in Israel, Anna has got to get that information. Now, I told you last time, this is what really strikes me, and when I was teaching Bible, this is where I'd stop and tell kids, You go find an unimportant person that you walk by every day. You sit down with them, and you talk to them about their life, and you find out who they are and what they're doing. And there are so many people around us, if we would just do that. You know, the guy who goes forward every Sunday in church that you kind of start making fun of because he's never, you know, the people you judge every day because they don't live up to our standards. The people that use bad language around us and we resent them. There's a baseball player, I tell the story, there's a baseball player this year who, one of the rules here at York College is if you get ejected as an athlete from the game, you have to come and apologize to the president before you play, which is an interesting encounter. And we had a young man on the baseball team this year who used a bad word. He was walking away. We'd already lost the game, and he was walking away. He was on deck. He wasn't even batting. He was on deck. And he said a bad word, and he said, "That pitch hasn't been a strike all day, blankety blank." And the umpire, "You're out of here, because you cannot, in NAI, you question the call, you're gone." And so he had to come see me. And, you know, he thought he was coming to see me because of getting ejected, which is part of it. And I said, I don't want that to be the way people perceive us or look at us, or I don't want that to be the image. I said, there are a lot of teams we play, with the stuff I hear coming out of their dugouts, and they're from a Christian college. I said, I resent that. And I said, I don't ever want that to be our case. So I said, getting ejected is bad enough, but I said, you really need to think about the way you talk and what it says to other people, because I said, I'm disappointed because I thought you were better than that. When we go to the conference, he sits out his required game. We go to conference championship, or conference, championship game. And because of my knees, I get up and walk a lot, and I'm walking behind the dugout. And I hear a bad word, and I said, "DB, is that you?" And he said, "I'm so sorry, President Eckman." And I caught him later after the game, and I said, "Now I want you to understand that I'm probably there all the time." Even when you don't think I'm in the same state you are, I'm probably there, so you need to watch your language. But I think of the influence, you know, that we all have as ordinary people on the lives of others. I love what Matt Nadol said the other day. You have influence on people, and you have ability to make a difference in their lives just because of the lifestyle you lead and the way people look at you. You know, he quoted St. Francis of Assisi again, saying, you know, preach the gospel if necessary, use words, and I think that's true as well. But here's Anna. So I want you to think about this cadre of people: Zachariah, Elizabeth, Mary. We haven't even really talked about Joseph. Who's going to do the right thing by her? You know, he's going to have her put away. There's a couple things you could do in this day. You could actually make a public spectacle out of Mary, because you realize she goes down, she spends 3 months. She finds out Elizabeth is in her 6th month. She goes and spends 3 months with her. They probably live in a one-room house. It's time for her to clear out, so she goes home. Mary goes home, and what's different about her after 3 months? Yeah, she got the bump, you know, and so, you know, she comes home, and everybody in the village of Nazareth has maybe 400 people, most, probably more closely to 300. It'd be like walking onto the York College campus. And Mary doesn't, I don't think she tells her mom, I don't think she tells anybody. She does, how do you explain this? And so she comes back and she's showing, and what is everybody's assumption? Yeah. And so either something happened while she was gone, or she and Joseph did something they shouldn't have done before she left, even though they're betrothed. They aren't officially married yet. And so when she comes back, Joseph's going to do the right thing because he doesn't know any better. Mary doesn't know how to explain it to him. She doesn't say a word to him. She's just going to live with whatever the consequences are because she's chosen God. I mean, her response to God, may it be done to me as you said. You know, I'm not going to argue with you. But Joseph then gets this message, and when he goes ahead and marries her, first of all, there's no ceremony. It's not a big deal in town. In fact, they probably do it privately. It's probably, you probably sneak away. And what's everybody's assumption then? Yeah, it's Joseph's baby. And so both of them have lost status now in the community. If you go back and look at Jesus' encounters in Nazareth from that point onward, you know, that's where he comes and they say, hey, do some of the mighty works that you've been doing other places we've been here. You heard about what you did in Capernaum. Come here and do it in Nazareth. He says, prophets without honor. And then he reads from the scroll of Isaiah, and he says, this day these words have been fulfilled in your hearing. And what do they want to do? Yeah, they're going to take him out and stone him. And I don't know all the dynamics of that, but here's what happens in my mind. I don't think it's miraculous that he just splits the crowd and walks through them. I think he faces them down. And if you look at Jesus' interactions with Nazareth, it's never good. You know, when I used to teach that, the title of this lesson was "Be True to Your School." And we do here in Nazareth what you've been doing everywhere else because we want to see a magician do his stuff. And Jesus won't do any miracles in Nazareth. In fact, he moves to Capernaum and takes Mary with him. And that's where he, from that point onward, his ministry comes out of Capernaum.
Steve, you may have used that strength and stature that he developed through moving all those stones. Say, get out of my way.
Yeah, it's very possible. I think that's
Physical presence.
Lee had a good point. You know, just because of who he was and the fact that they recognize he's a hard worker and he could probably take care of himself. Yeah. So nobody's going to mess with him in Nazareth. I mean, this whole thing, when you look at when you get it out of the realm of stories and you start asking the question, what's really going on here? Who are these people? And why are they doing what they're doing? And start trying to question your own. And, you know, a lot of the stuff I'm saying is assumptions I make. I understand that. But I try to make sense in my own mind. What is the dynamic that's going on here? And how is Jesus interacting with these people? And it's different with different groups, different people. Well, as we end this up, you know, once again, as we start at the beginning, as I meant to begin this class, I hope that we're really cognizant, of the people around us, and the fact that the craziest person that we know may be closer to God than any of us. And the responsibility that we have to be the kind of people that God would choose were he coming again. And that doesn't mean we have to have superior knowledge of the scriptures. Doesn't even mean we need to have great wisdom, but we need to be willing to be used by God. That willingness, that humility of letting God live through us and give his message through us is the most important key. Because if you read through the Old Testament, a lot of people that Terry brought up this morning, and in the New Testament, you'll see people that you never hear from again. But for some reason, they're missing because they had some kind of impact in having God's will worked on us. And I think we need to be open to that. You know, my whole career, I mentioned this a little bit, I've never applied for a job. I've just told God, put me where you want me. Put me some pretty unusual places once I got there, I wish I hadn't been. Had some things happen to me that I wish hadn't happened. But I look back on that and I realize that everything happened. We're all in this room old enough to know that we can make a lot more sense of our life looking backward than we could at 25 looking forward. And I think we see that if we're open to God's will and let him work, even the bad things that happen to us and the bad decisions that we make, he can make something good out of it. And I think that's the message. But don't overlook people. Let God use you. You be an influence. You know, since this is the last time I'll be talking to you in this way, I want to once again thank you for coming this week. We always look forward to RoundUp. Look forward to this week. You guys know this by looking at Gail, but this is her baby. You know, she works on this all year. She's tireless in her efforts to make sure it's a great experience for you. And you know, I hope you not only keep coming, but you keep bringing people with you. RoundUp is a unique experience, and one that I hope that you have enjoyed, and I hope that has had an impact on your lives, because you all have an impact on our lives. Just being here and the examples that you show, your dedication to God and the lives that you've lived in service to Him are important to your college and the people that work here. We appreciate you for that. So glad you're here. Hope you've had a good week. Hope nobody got hurt too bad. Where's Ethel? Yeah. Ethel fell last night. It's either that or she got this sling so she could get some sympathy.
Thank the Lord I did not break anything. I just sprained my shoulder.
She sprained her shoulder, but she'll be up playing racquetball again tomorrow.